Future Now Show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Future Now Show. Today, we're discussing diversity in our rapidly evolving multicultural world with Gidoomal, author of My Silk Road, The Adventures and Struggles of a British Asian Refugee. Hi, Ram. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, good to join you, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Happy to have you here. So I recently began reading your new book, and wow, I mean, what a life journey you've had. You know, I really want to get into talking about your early experiences, having been a multicultural man yourself. So where did your origins begin? Where's your family from?
Yeah, my family is from British India, but in 1947, the British partitioned British India. So several countries were created. And where we were was effectively became the Muslim part of British India, Pakistan. And our family being Hindu had to flee. And for their lives, people were killing each other. So they jumped on a ship and went to East Africa. And I was born in Mombasa, Kenya. So 47 partition took place. 1950, I was born in Mombasa, Kenya, lived there until 1967. And in 67, again, we were expelled from East Africa and arrived as refugees in London. So that's already two migrations from British India to East Africa, and then from British East Africa after independence to London, England, where we arrived as refugees. And so that was the sort of early part of our lives. So I was brought up really in many cultures, in my own Indian culture, and then in Africa, within an African context. And then even within the Indian culture, there are subcultures. So my school was what we would say Gujarati, which is Gujarat is another part of India. So there was that infusion. There was the Swahili African infusion. And then there was, of course, my own Indian background, Sindhi infusion. So there was a lot of different strands coming in. And then when we arrived in, and Kenya was a British colony. So we were brought up as British subjects. School curriculum was all in English, all British curriculum, the colonial thing going on. And then when we arrived in London, it was easy in one sense, because that was Britain, the mother country. But again, this was now the mother country, right in Britain now where it all originates. So again, slight differences. So it was fascinating to have all these different strands coming in my early childhood, right until I was a teenager.
Wow, yeah, really fascinating. You know, I was reading about your experiences in Kenya, and from what I read, your dad was working there, and all of a sudden, you know, you in your early years, your family had been deported. You had to leave Kenya suddenly when you're living this amazing life there and had such roots there. What was that like?
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, there was the sudden move for my family from British India. Now, the deportation order, 24 hours to leave the country. Wow. Couldn't take anything. You had to arrive in London with whatever you can get, whatever you can take, because it was a total deportation. So we got used to three cars, a 15-bedroom, 3 apartments, 15 bedrooms, a very successful business. There was domestic helpers all along. It was a luxurious lifestyle. The beach every day, a quick swim back home. It was just wonderful. And then arriving in London, everything gone. Now refugees, 15 of us, 4 bedrooms, just enough money to buy a corner shop, a mom and pop store, chocolates, sweets, cigarettes, that kind of thing. 4 bedrooms, 15 of us, 1 bathroom and toilet. 8 teenagers having to share that to get ready for school was a nightmare. I took the decision. I would get up at 6 in the morning, have my shower and bath and run to school and not get involved with queues and waiting and get into trouble at school because you get punished if you're late. So it was an interesting upbringing. And, you know, we had all that. But in addition, in Britain, the migrants were really looked down upon and not welcome. So there was that whole aspect now in terms of culture. We were seen as migrants. And the politicians just love to make anti-migrant speeches because that was the popular culture of the time. So every time a politician spoke when we arrived against migrants, that journey from home to school, from the shop to school, may only have been half a mile, but boy, it was the longest journey you could imagine, because you were open to abuse, open to physical attack. One particular Asian kid was beaten so badly, we got the scare of our life. We said, we're not going alone. We will go in threes, fours, and go to school together and be safe. So it was a bit of a, a bit of a shock in terms of different cultures and learning to cope with difference. And of course, we learned very quickly that a very popular thing to do was to, the football club behind us was called Queen's Park Rangers. It still exists, a very popular club amongst certain people. I still support it, but we then got the blue and white gloves, blue and white hat, blue and white scarf, which was the colors of the club. And that's what we would wear. And it served as our protection so that we were less likely to be attacked because we were seen as, oh, these guys are good. They support our local football club. They're okay. But not everybody saw that, but it reduced the number of people who were out to get us.
Wow. That must have been such a culture shock for all of you going through that.
Huge shock. We couldn't believe it. We said, in Africa, at least we were accepted and we could live comfortably. Clearly, for my parents, what happened in British India was a shock, because suddenly you had Hindus and Muslims living next to each other in peace for millennia. All of a sudden, overnight, it's gone. So for them, it was a huge shock, and they lost the palace they were living in. Now here, we lost everything in Kenya, and when but we were very peacefully living there, and it was great. Arriving in England was the opposite. It was suddenly surrounded by hostility and by the shop ran. People loved the fact that we ran the shop because they could buy their milk and cigarettes and their newspapers and all that. So within the shop, we were okay. The moment we went outside the shop on the streets, it was tough. And so it was different cultures, different hits. It was just learning to get used to a different environment. It was challenging.
Absolutely. You have to find inner strength and resilience just to power through that. And it must have really brought your family together just going through all those challenges.
Totally. And it taught us to really learn how to live with animosity and with difference. We had to be deferential. We had no choice. The other were the majority. The other were in charge. And we just had to learn to put our head down, don't look people in the eye, make your way out, come back home. It was a shock, and we had to learn how to cope with it and how to overcome it. So, and that is where we learned a lot, because we noticed, for example, certain customers coming who had a different accent. We learned that they were from Ireland. So they were not local because they were now from the Irish part of Britain. And we then asked them what they missed from home, because we missed stuff from home. They said, oh, we miss our cigarettes. They gave us the brand name, Carol's #1. They missed certain chocolates. They missed the newspapers, the Irish Times, the Irish Independent. We said, we can get all that for you. We got those, imported those for them. They loved us because of that. They paid us more, so we made more money. And within 2 years, we had 6 shops.
Wow. I mean, talk about learning and growing and finding such unique ways to connect with the people. I mean, that's very smart. It is.
Yeah, we literally started. So we noticed Yugoslavian customers. So we asked them, how do you say good morning in your language? So when they came, we would greet them in their language. Dobre jutre, dobre din, dobre pala. And the Irish, we said, konostate, tomagama ufe, gura mille magos. We just learned their language. We learned the good expressions. They loved us for it. And they then told their friends and relatives, hey, there's some great people here. And they bring the stuff that they're missing. Hence the success. Suddenly, all the customers are coming to us. Suddenly, they're buying from us, paying us more. So no wonder within 2 years, brothers and cousins and all, we had 6 shops. It was just exciting.
Yes. So, Also I read in your book that your family has sort of really branched out all over the world. I mean, you had family that went to Japan and, obviously Kenya and everywhere.
All over, because when British India was partitioned, our people had to leave in a hurry. So they all chose either where did they have relatives if they could get there in time. So like we got on a ship, we were very fortunate, but there were others who may have got on a ship that took them to, I don't know, the United States maybe, or to, I know that we have had relatives in Hawaii, as far as in Fiji, in Japan. I mean, my grandfather's brother was operating we were operating a silk business. So grandfather's brother, youngest brother, went to Japan, where he supplied the silk. The younger middle brother went to Kenya, and my grandfather went to Cape Town in South Africa. So already you can see a dispersion, the diaspora, the dispersion. And so, today there are 20 million South Asians, at least, if not more, 25 million, all over the globe, in almost every country you can think of. So our own family, when I came to draw my family tree, and I give the story in my book about how that happened, because we had lockdown. And when we had lockdown in Britain, like all over the world, there was lockdown. My birthday fell right in the middle of lockdown, my 70th birthday. And
Wow.
the children all were disappointed that we couldn't celebrate together because you couldn't meet more than 2 at a time. So it was me and my wife sitting to celebrate my birthday, a glass of champagne each, sitting down, saying, now what? She puts the camera up and it puts on Zoom. Suddenly the family appears on Zoom from Israel, where one of my sons is, and from Durham, North England, and from London. And they produced the most amazing hour-and-a-half video of messages from across the world. They contacted my relatives in different parts of the world: Jamaica, Barbados, New York, India, the Philippines, Manila, everywhere where my family is extended. And this video was incredible. So they then asked me, who are these people, Papa? I then said to them, I'll start telling you. So I start writing down who they are. And as I start writing down who they are and give stories to them, a publisher gets wind of it. And the publisher said, I'd like to publish that book. And so I said to him, I've drawn a family tree. I tracked 200 family members in different parts of the world. And it was just incredible. That whole family tree was drawn, children, grandchildren, all documented, birth dates, years of birth. And it was the most exciting thing to do, because it just showed where the family had spread, how far they had gone, and the diversity within one family. To have a Jamaican, to have a Kenyan, to have a New Yorker, to have a Delhiite from Delhi and Bombay, and it was just exciting. And then we have relative, in Switzerland. I mean, I myself went to work in France, and then in Switzerland, and then in Scotland. So in each place you go to, you pick up a bit of culture. You begin to see the differences, and you learn to adapt and adopt and to work with the variety and the diversity of cultures that are there. Now, not many people can do that. And that is the challenge of today: diversity and working with diversity.
Right. This is happening so much. There's this whole trend, especially with the younger generations. My cousins, they travel everywhere. My cousin Jenny, she's actually in Bali right now teaching yoga.
Wow.
Small town girl from Ohio, and so I mean, it's really everywhere, and we're kind of branching out. And I myself, I have an apartment in Bangkok, Thailand.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. But you see, this is it. But not many can do that. And so the challenge is for example, in Britain, when I'm running my businesses, right, many of them are monocultural, and they get a shock and they don't know how to deal with the diversity. So the result, I think, is they go inside, they become anti-immigrant, and that's when you start getting tensions. That's when you start getting the problems that we see today of people not getting on with one another, stopping migration, stopping the free flow of people. It's really sad to see what happens when people don't learn to live with diversity.
Right. And look at Brexit, right? I mean, Brexit was
Shocker.
All about
I mean,
that.
yeah, I mean, boy, Brexit, I mean, we are paying for it now. The economy has been hit. The country has been hit very badly. And, you know, they just don't see the value of diversity. And actually, many countries can be like that. I'll never forget a trip I made to Holland, where in Amsterdam, we had there's an annual conference that takes place called the Appeldoorn Conference, started when the two prime ministers met, the Prime Minister of Holland and the Prime Minister of Britain. And when they met, they vowed to do this more often because that would build bridges between the Dutch and the British. That's a great idea. But when I went to Amsterdam, I heard the mayor there give his opening speech to our conference, Mayor Cohen. And he said, you know, and by the year 2030, Amsterdam is going to be 100% non-Dutch. The majority are going to be non-Dutch. So I put my hand up at question time. I said, Mayor Cohen, can you not see that by 2030, Amsterdam will be a 100% Dutch, but the definition of Dutch has changed?
Right.
He said, interesting. He said, interesting. And I've used the same argument here in Britain. When they say, oh, we're not going to be 100% British, I said, look, the definition of British will change. You know, when we have a private, in this country, we had government leaders saying the national dish of Britain is no longer roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. It's now tandoori chicken, you know, chicken masala tandoori. And he's right. You know, you go across Britain, everybody loves a curry. Everybody loves a good bit of Indian food and spicy food. And it's happening everywhere. You know, you got the flat in Bangkok. I mean, Thai food has become very popular. Suddenly you got Thai restaurants and people know what to order. And, you know, I think that's exciting. But that's what we need more of: diversity, multiculturalism. But it's not easy.
It is not easy. There's a lot of unsurety, a lot of people that are, you know, obviously they have fears about their country not being their country anymore. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's all fear. You know, the reality is that even here in America, right? You know, most of the people that we know, they can't trace their ancestors in America back hundreds of years. Most of the people I know are first, second, or third generation American, you know? And we grew up talking about where our backgrounds are from. Okay, I'm Irish and German, or, you know, I'm Italian, but they don't just say I'm American. So, you know, it's very conflicting, right, with all this. At the end of the day, we're all one people. We travel, we're spreading out. So a lot of change.
And which is why when we look at the future, I think this to me is a really important issue, because the future is going to be more and more diverse, whether people like it or not. It's going to be more and more diverse, and we just have to learn to adjust, to adapt, to adopt, and to benefit from the riches of diversity. Because, you know, I take companies in the business world, the more diverse a board, and let me begin with diversity with bringing more women into boards, let alone cultures, just get more women onto boards, and suddenly the decision making is changing because the men have missed certain points and that the women pick up. And you find a richness just in that level of diversity. Then you add the international perspective, and there are bits we would miss. So, you know, there was that famous case where somebody developed slippers and they used a Hindu god on the sole of the slipper. Riots in India, riots everywhere. They had to destroy the entire stock because they did not realize the sensitivity of doing that against another culture. You know, putting your foot on the image of a god that they worship. So to the extent you have people of different cultures and different backgrounds beginning to check and counter check and contribute, oh, it's just fantastic to see how businesses can flourish and grow because you now got the benefit which otherwise you wouldn't have. And I think that to me is so exciting about diversity, multiculturalism, and really breaking set when it comes to diversity. It's just fascinating to see the impact.
Absolutely. Especially since our entire world, our trade is built on globalization,
Hmm.
right? And there's people that want to be able to live wherever they want to live. And, instead people have to deal with all these visa systems and, checking
Yeah,
in at places, depending on
yeah,
where you live.
yeah.
Obviously there needs to be change, right? I
Correct.
mean,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll never forget a major British company. I can even name it because it is, I know this happened there. British Gas, huge, a multi-billion-pound company, and then another company, British Telecom. They, this is now I'm talking in the 80s and 90s, went to India to sign trade deals. Okay. What was fascinating is, and I won't mention which company won and which company lost, but the company that recruited local Indians in Britain to join their team and went to India won the contract, as opposed to the other company that just went monoculturally
right.
because they didn't know how to negotiate with the Indians. The other company was getting inside knowledge and saying, hey, you know what? This is what they're saying. This is how we can do it. And suddenly you're building bridges, you're building a basis of a negotiation and a deal. And on the other side, there's polarization, lack of understanding. Oh, we don't know what they're saying. We don't quite agree with them. But to the extent the diverse team went, having recruited the Indians in our doorstep in Britain onto their team, it's a no-brainer. And this is where, to me, I know that in the United States, I've seen how fantastic it is when you have, today you look at Silicon Valley and you look at who is running Google, who is running Microsoft, who is, you've got a whole lot of Indians who've
Yeah.
taken over, which is fascinating. But the fact that the United States culture allows it tells you something about their culture, which I think is very powerful. Because as you said rightly, you have that, you're rooted just first, second, third generation. It's there, which is a great advantage.
Yes, yes. What's really funny is that where I live right now in North Carolina, I'm in a town right outside of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yes, I know,
And
Riley. Yes, I've been there.
oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of my Indian family, I have Indians in my entire neighborhood on both
Whoa.
sides. Literally, the whole entire neighborhood is just, they're so lovely. And, they play music and they're very spiritual. And it's just, the energy is just awesome. And there's a lot of diversity right here. More
In
so than I even
Raleigh,
experienced.
North
Yes,
Carolina. Wow.
yes,
That's
because it's
great.
all tech workers.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
So we have
You have a great university there, don't you?
yeah,
You
yeah,
have a
we have
great
great
university.
schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Google, Microsoft, all these companies are, being based here as well. So yes, there's a lot of workers. I mean, there's Brazilians as well that we've met and people from all over the world here, which I was really surprised, especially since I just moved here from New York City. And I would say, of course, New York City is
Oh,
majorly diverse in
amazing,
many ways.
amazing, amazing.
It's the melting pot, right, of
Yeah,
America. But
yeah, yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised when I came here because there's great Thai food, great Indian food, and of course I get to
Amazing.
enjoy a little bit of peace, and quiet as well. So it's nice.
That's amazing. No, it's fantastic. And this is where I think America scores above so many countries because in the United States, you're used to that diversity in one sense. And I think that's fantastic. And that's where there's a huge advantage, which is why it can do so well. But today with Brexit here, we've just shut the doors.
Mhm.
We've shut the doors. We've sent a message. Today's headlines in our newspaper was 4,000 European doctors will never come back here. And we need doctors. But they're saying, no, you treat us bad. You're rude to us. You don't like us. Goodbye. We're not coming. And that's what the world will say slowly. You shut your doors, stay yourselves, and we can't survive. So that's the
Right.
sadness. And diversity, multiculturalism, to me, all that is so important and huge advantage to the economy, to society, to people, to global understanding. Absolutely.
Right. It just seems with Brexit and these other populist uprisings, there's this real big push to try to, clamp down on outsiders and, all these things. And it just, at this point, I mean, it's just so counterproductive. I mean, it's going backwards. And it really is
Yep.
just a good example of what not to do at this point, because it's just causing more suffering, really.
Absolutely, because the future is so clear, and we need to see it and prepare for it. And I think that is where really we need to focus. What's the future going to be like? Diverse and even more diverse. And I think to the extent that people can learn to cope with that diversity, accept it, adapt to it, and learn to live with it and take advantage of it. Because that is what we need to be doing as we prepare for the future. There is really a huge opportunity that we have, and this opportunity is there now. And things like Brexit are not going to be any helpful to anybody. We've got to be open.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in your opinion, what are some ways that diversity, can be taken advantage? What are the advantages of it that people can really jump on right now in the business world, especially?
Easy. Yeah, no, firstly, in terms of diversity, we need to make sure people are aware, because some people are not even aware that there is a diversity. They're so locked into their communities that they don't want to look beyond their communities. So the first thing is to raise that awareness. Then it's learning how to build bridges. So, okay, there is diversity and there are different people in our midst. How do we build bridges? So when you've got raised awareness and you're building bridges, you go to cross-cultural divides. How do I do that? So to me, it's about training and teaching within our communities, our companies, in the business world. We run a training course for the business world and for the biggest banks. And it is exactly as simple as I told you, ABC, awareness, bridge building, crossing cultural divides, because so many of them within the banks that they're working, they don't realize, they get afraid. Why does that person wear a turban? Now they won't ask the question. Once you explain to them why, they said, oh, I see. So that's what it is. Absolutely. Why are you so afraid to ask that question? Because to the extent you understand it, you're now understanding that person. Now you're understanding that person, you can begin to talk to them and deal with them as equals without fear, because all that dampens any opportunities. So to me, in getting businesses to harness the opportunity, it's getting those, because businesses are your employees, to getting your employees to really understand and not be afraid of difference is the first step. Because without that, where do they start? Where do they go? So there's awareness, there's learning to build bridges with your other employees, learning to cross the cultural divide, and then saying, now what can we do to develop? Then develop your business. Because to develop it, you need to go through those first 3-4 phases. So in terms of global trading, okay, who am I dealing with? Looking at our order book, we're getting a lot of orders from India, for example. We're getting them from India. Whereabouts in India is the order coming from? Gujarat. Where is Gujarat? What do they speak? What do they eat? What do they drink? Do I understand that? If I'm now going on a business trip to India and I need to get to Gujarat, I need to already be prepared. To the extent I'm prepared, I'm already one step ahead. I'm already sort of on my way to doing a deal, as opposed to going cold. I don't understand the language. I don't understand these people. They're different. There's no alcohol available there. By the way, it's a dry state. So many get a shock when they go to Gujarat. The alcohol gets confiscated. They can't have it. And then they go in there. They say it's all vegetarian. Sorry, no meat here, mate. I mean, you can get it these days, but it's understanding, being prepared, and not getting shocked. And then when you're there, you're prepared. You start talking to whoever your counterpart is, and you're doing deals. And this is understanding where you're going. You go to Japan. I know when I went to Japan, I really took my course seriously. So when I took out my business card, I had to make sure I presented it with respect. And when the other person gave it to me with respect, I had to understand seniority. Who is senior? Who is not senior? The respect for seniority is huge. So it's understanding those little things like that and saying, I pay respect to that. I pay attention to that. My chance of getting a deal will hopefully be better than anyone who doesn't know that or is not prepared. So to me, for the business world, it's be prepared, learn about where you're going to be doing your business with internationally, even locally. Even locally in Britain. One of the books I wrote, by the way, very controversial title, The British and How to Deal with Them. And the deal is do business with. And the subtext is doing business with Britain's ethnic communities, because they have huge spending power. The
Right.
minority communities today have billions of disposable income at the fingertip. They're a huge market. How do we market to them within our own country? I'm talking just Britain. And the same, no doubt, in the United States. And I've seen it in the United States. I've been there at least 5 times in the last 8 weeks, from Hawaii to Colorado Springs to New York,
Wow.
New Jersey, Philadelphia. And I've seen how the American market is shifting. And, it's phenomenal. But how do people do business with the communities in the midst who now got the dollar? They talk about the pink pound for the gay community. There is the brown pound for the Asian community, the black pound for the black community, or the black dollar, the brown dollar, the yellow dollar, the pink dollar. It's targeting those communities to get that dollar in to your coffers and then improve your margins. It's simple. They're there.
Right.
But target them, learn about them, focus on them, and then do your marketing.
Are you listening, everyone? You got to learn about the ABCs.
Correct. The awareness, the bridge building. What did I do? That corner shop when we came as refugees, we became aware of the Irish. We learned to build bridges with them. So what are you missing? What do you need? You then need to cross cultures, learn a bit of their language, learn a bit of their communication. And then we said, right, now do something. Get the goods, sell them, make it. No shortcut.
Yes. Well, obviously, your bridge building definitely worked. I mean, you went from one shop after having lost everything.
Everything. And then 6
You were
shops.
living like kings, basically, in Kenya,
Yeah,
and then
we were.
and
then
then
suddenly
6
all
shops.
gone. But then when we came to Britain, we used the simple principles again. And I know when my wife's uncle invited me to work with him, he was moving his banking finance operations to Geneva, Switzerland. I had no fear. I can move country. Yeah, we were here 1 minute, bought a nice house, got married. We said, nah, sell it. Let's go to Geneva. Went to Geneva. 8 years later, I was helping run a business with 7,000 people in 15 countries. This is in the 80s, turning over $200 million. And
Wow.
and this business was now diverse: a brewery in Nigeria, a vineyard in France, a tea estate in India, and then buying and selling sugar, rice, frozen chicken, you name it. But just exciting, because we understood difference. We understood how to now handle a diversity of things with a diverse range of countries. Open an office in Saudi Arabia, office in Dubai, but without fear, because you now know you can deal with different cultures and learn to understand them and work with them.
Absolutely. One of the things that you wrote in the book, one of the quotes you shared was, citizenship is a two-way street, those arriving and those welcoming.
Yeah, that I wrote because, in Britain, in the 80s, there were riots in one of our cities. Now I've seen the riots in the United States with the black-white riots. Now here we had the Asian community in North England, in Bradford, rioting. And it was very sad to see, because there was people with blood on their face. It was awful to see the riots and the impact of the riots. But being on the board of the Institute of Citizenship, I was a trustee. We had a trustees meeting the very next morning when the riots had broken out. And one of the trustees said, "Ooh, these immigrants who come, this material we have developed on citizenship will be good for them. They should all be learning to take training in citizenship." And I immediately said, and let's not forget, the locals also need to take training in citizenship, because maybe they've forgotten what good citizenship means. It's a two-way street. Each one has to learn, each one has to be trained, each one has to be understanding of the other, because good citizenship is for everybody, not just the immigrant coming in. The locals need to be also respectful and be good citizens. And I think that then is a recipe for harmony and peace. Otherwise, sadly, the expectation becomes they have to change, they have to do this, and we'll just sit on a high horse and do nothing, and it just doesn't work. It's two ways. And I think that is so important. To be welcoming is part of citizenship, isn't it? To be accommodating is part of citizenship. If I'm a good local citizen, then I need to also welcome the other in my midst, and not put up such an attitude that they then resent it, and then you got the basis of friction. You got the basis of something that will not work and be sustainable. And I think that is what we need. You're absolutely right.
Indeed, indeed. I personally would like to see international business being taught in high school, even elementary school.
Mhm.
And the international business shouldn't just be, oh, I'm going to take an international business course in Switzerland for a couple of years, and now I'm an international business person.
No,
No.
it starts from childhood, which is why I love it. When like in Britain, I've seen some schools teach Japanese to kids. They have special Japanese classes. I love it. I think that's great. I was very fortunate, even in Kenya. I know my uncle went to learn German because he wanted to export his material to Germany. I went along with him to the class. I tagged along. I was like a 10, 11-year-old. And I still remember the German I learned then. So when I visited Germany, I was using a lot of the German I'd learned as a kid. They were all surprised. Wow. I knew very little, but enough to waffle, enough to make a point. But I was glad I learned as a kid. And then, of course, being brought up in Kenya, where I was brought up in Swahili and Gujarati and Hindi and all that, it's an asset, a real asset.
How many languages would you, or how many languages are you fluent in, but how many do you know enough in as well?
I think my fluency would be in at least 4 languages, but I would say I can get by with at least 8 or 9. So, I've had to learn Hebrew because my son married a Hungarian Jewish girl. So when babysitting the grandchildren, I really have to have some basic Hebrew, because otherwise they'd talk their way around me and I wouldn't know what they're saying. So now they know I understand a bit of Hebrew. They're careful. My daughter married a Swedish boy. So again, grandchildren, they're babysitting. I thought I better learn a bit of Swedish. So I've done basic Swedish, basic Hebrew. Of course, I speak Hindi. During lockdown, I learned to read and write in Hindi, although I could speak it. And then Gujarati, I learned at school. French, we lived in France and Switzerland, so I had to learn French and speak it as fluently as I can, and I still do. And then so Swahili, I've never forgotten. I still remember it. So like that, there's a range. Gujarati is different to Hindi because that's a different state and a different language. So there's Gujarati, Hindi, Swahili, French, Hebrew, Swedish, and so at least 6 or 7 languages there, and then a smattering of Spanish and a few other things, because we go to Spain quite often on holiday. So you do need to know how to order good food and good wine in Spanish.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely need the good Rioja.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yes, love it, love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, out of all the chapters in your book, My Silk Road, which chapter is your favorite?
Oh boy.
That's a hard one.
That's a very hard one. Yeah, I mean, it's a series of stories, isn't it? And you're talking about My Silk Road, just so we can see what My Silk Road looks like. You've got it there with the forward by Prabhu. And to me, that was so important that she did the forward, because I got to really know her. And she does the Bake Off program, and amongst other things. But which is my favorite chapter? Gosh, I think when I came to do the last chapter, if I'm honest, that to me was a very moving time, because by then I had gone through a whole series of experiences that I had got through in my life, from the expulsion in Kenya. Then I talk about how we settled in London. And then I talk about even in that period in Kenya, how I was sent to a school in Bangalore, but didn't quite make it. But that first visit to India, that was such an incredible experience for me. In terms of diversity and culture, I must share what I wrote there. I wish I could read you that bit of the extract, because I did it in public readings in India, and people were touched. I said how when I landed in India at the age of 13 for the first time, what shocked me most was they all looked like me.
Mm.
I had never experienced anything like it. I've been in Africa, different, been to an English school, different. Here, the entire country could be my brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, and cousins. It was an extraordinary sensation to suddenly be in a place where everybody looked like me, talked like me. It was just phenomenal. And to me, that was just an experience I never imagined I would have. And the difference that I experienced was in the similarity of all of us. So that was the difference. We were all the same.
Right.
That was exciting. Now, in terms of therefore which chapter, I suppose it was in the last chapter where I had to bring it all together and literally say, having now looked at all this, I am so blessed. I am so amazed at how I have been able to go through life without having to be at the bottom all the time, because it's called My Silk Road. And the message is everyone can have their own Silk Road. And I really have written this for my grandchildren and for the next generation, saying, don't ever say, I can't do it, or it won't happen to me. I think that the motto I've quoted is, don't let what you cannot do stop you from doing what you can do. Go forward with that can-do culture. Yes, there will be barriers. Yes, there will be the downs. Yes, there will be challenges. Like my first one, earliest challenge was I couldn't go to university because my father died and the bank accounts got frozen and I had no money to pay for a university education. And I promised him I would go to university. So I wrote 200 letters for scholarships to be given to me. And eventually one worked. When it came to do my research, hundreds of letters written again, because there's no shortage, there's no shortcut. And then when it came to getting a job, I mean, in this instance, it was so difficult to get a job in the 80s, and especially with my background, wrong tie, wrong school, wrong background, refugee, they would look at all that and say, I would never go past the first sifting stage. Yet I persisted. And I got my first breakthrough with the bank, with an international bank in the City of London. So, it's my message is don't give up, keep trying, just keep going, write, talk to people, do what you can, but you can do it. And that's my message. And I closed the book with that last chapter saying, everyone can have their own Silk Road. And it is important never to forget that. So I love it. When I was invited to India, I went to a university to speak when the book was being launched. It was a class full, at a university class full of young ladies, young girls. And I just had to give them that message of hope and say, don't say I'm the wrong caste or I'm the outcast or I don't have as much as those people have. Hey, you can do it. I had nothing. And, I'm here to tell the story and to write the story.
What a wonderful message. Seriously, listen, everyone, the book, it's out. Go get it. It's on Amazon. It's right
Yes.
there, My Silk Road. I
Yep.
read it myself, and it's
Yep.
a fantastic book. And just, if you're into international business, the journey of someone who has truly expanded all around the world, you definitely got to check it out. All right, Ram, I have one more question for you before we go.
Sure.
What might diversity and multiculturalism look like in the year 2050?
Whoa, what a question. Thank you. What a brilliant question. What might it look like? Well, a lot will depend on what we do today. A lot will depend on what we do today. And the message I have for today is go out there, break those barriers, take that first step to crossing that cultural divide, because you just don't know what's going to happen. I share a story that occurred in the very first training class I gave in London on awareness, bridge building, crossing cultures. The first lesson. In the following week, when the class reconvened, a lady put her hand up. I said, yes. She said, I want to tell you something. When I go and pick my kid up from school, the white mothers stand together in one place, and all the Indian mothers stand together in another place. But this time, I decided to raise my eyes up and look at the other group. Another lady from the other group raised her eye up and looked at me, and we smiled. When our kids came to greet the mums, her son and my son were together, so happened, holding hands and running. And then her son went to her and my son came to me, and we looked at each other and we decided we would walk together. We were living in the same area, so we started walking back together. So from never being together, we took that first step to walk back together to our respective streets. And there began a journey. You know, a journey of 1,000 steps begins with one step. So when we look at 2050, it may seem like thousands of steps away, but what we do today will impact what it will look like. And I would say that if this message is taken on board seriously, I would say 2050 is going to be, we're all going to look the same. We won't be able to see the difference. Whether we are Dutch, Greek, white, brown, we just say, hey, you know, whether it's Annabelle or whether it's Anushka or whether it is Anjali, they'll just get on, you know, they'll just walk as if that's a norm. That becomes a norm, not different. And to me, that is exciting. You know, like my kids are Ravi, which means France in French, delighted, and in Indian, the sun. My daughter is Nina, a global name. My youngest son is Ricky, R-I-C-K, but with an I. It could be any name, Italian, English, you know, and we're going to get that kind of togetherness without any differences being observed or experienced other than, hey, we're all one. And we're going to enjoy each other's food and each other's company. And that's what I like, you know, that we're going to get fusion, music fusion, food fusion, fashion fusion. It's going to be a new culture, a new world, a new dawn, a new day. And I'm looking forward to it if I'm still alive then.
I'm also looking forward to it. Here's to the future.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, Ram. Well, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. Absolutely.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. And yes, I've loved chatting with you. And the subject is so exciting and so rich. And I just really pray that people will take it on board and do it, not just talk about it, but do it.
Exactly. It's time to make it happen.
You're absolutely right.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in to today's show, and stay tuned for more episodes of the Future Now Show.